Bismillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Lockdown Library with me, Asim Qureshi. So today I have Makers of the Muslim World series by One World. This whole series is really fantastic and I highly recommend it to everybody. They take on various Islamic thinkers throughout the world. And the one I've chosen today is a book about Husain Ahmad Madani called The Jihad for Islam and India's Freedom. It's written by Professor Barbara Metcalf from the University of Michigan. It's a superb narrative of Maulana Husain Ahmad Madani's life. For those of you who don't know, he was one of the principals of the Deoband University in India and has quite the prolific history. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the book because I just took a lot from it when I first read it. It's just written, brilliantly. It's researched very well. There's a lot of primary source data that's used within the book. So I think Professor Metcalf, she's done a fantastic job of bringing Maulana Husain Ahmad Madani's work to life. But she does situate the book in a much wider history, and that's really the history of the Deoband. And it's important to understand that history, especially for contemporary times, when we're facing many similar challenges to those that were faced by these scholars, early scholars of Islam, at least within kind of contemporary times. So just a little bit of background. The story of the Deoband really begins with the story of the 1857 Indian Rebellion, which was a rebellion that took place by Indian sepoys who were members of the British Army in India. Technically the First East India Company, and who rebelled against their own regiments for what they perceived as abuses against their religion. This is often reduced to kind of like anxiety over kind of bullet cartridges being greased in pig and cow fat, but actually there was a much longer history of abuses against religion that led to that point where they actually decided to finally rebel, and they rebelled to such an extent that they almost defeated the British. But unfortunately, they were stopped in their tracks, and what resulted was a brutal massacre against men, women, and children. There are images still to this day of sepoys who were strapped to cannons and had cannonballs shot through them. But one of the things that the British did was that they actually ended up sending a lot of Muslim and Hindu rebels, or who they perceived to be rebels, because not everybody was, to the prison island of Kalabani, which is based on the Andaman Islands. And there they were detained without charge or trial, in many ways, just like Guantanamo Bay. So this is a story that very much starts in kind of a repression. It starts in unlawful detention of kind of prison islands. And you get a sense of how the British responded to this, and how, especially within the Muslim world, there needed to be some kind of response. And that response for the founders of the Deoband school really was in kind of reasserting a strong need for a Muslim identity. And so in 1866, Qasim Nanadawi and many others, they founded the school that would be known as Deoband. And the very first graduate that they had was a man who would go on to be known as Sheikh al-Hind, Mahmud al-Hassan, who would also then become the future headmaster of the Deoband. And it's really with him that the story of Husain Ahmad Madani really begins, because Mahmud al-Hassan, as he became the headmaster of the Deoband, he stuck quite close to the original aims of the founders, which was to train Muslims up to such an extent that they were able to also assert some sort of authority and autonomy, with political autonomy within India. And so him, alongside certain other well-known figures from the period, such as Ubaydullah Sindhi, they came up with a plan they had to be very careful about how they sent messages across the world to all of the different kind of leaders of the Muslim world. So they sewed letters within silk scarves as a way of hiding this communication. But unfortunately, in 1916, this plot was discovered by the British. As is often the case with these things, somebody turned who was aware of the plot, and he informed the British that this was taking place. And so the British government then, of course, did what you would expect them to do in such a circumstance. They ordered the arrest of Sheikh al-Hind Mahmud al-Hassan. He actually managed to get out of India. He managed to come out to the country, and he made his way to Hijaz, to modern day Saudi Arabia. And while he was there, he, kind of obviously performed all the rites you would expect him to. But he also then tried to, to make that his new base. It's there that he meets a younger Husain Ahmad Madani, who this book is specifically based around. Madani was based there with his family. He was teaching Hanafi fiqh. And, as soon as he heard that Mahmud al-Hassan, who, he revered, even though they hadn't met up until this point, he went to be in his company. So what you're going to understand is that at this period of time, although Mahmud al-Hassan and Ubaydullah Sindhi and these guys are like trying to make these plans about bringing the Muslim world together, there are other plans that are taking place. So he is completely unaware that in 1915, Sharif Husain, who is the guardian of Hijaz, still at this point under the Ottoman Caliphate, it's still a governorship. He is already making agreements with the British that they will get their own autonomy, that their own kind of version of a nation state, if they split away from the Ottoman Empire. So in 1915, Sharif Hussain signs the Hussein-McMahon Agreement, which effectively establishes that the British will assist them to break away from the Ottoman Empire, providing they're willing to not interfere in other British designs in the region. So Sharif Hussain hears that this great scholar of India has arrived, and at this time in particular, the world didn't look as it looks right now. So the whole notion that there was this kind of hierarchy of races between with Arabs at the top and those from the subcontinent being treated badly, that didn't exist in the same way. In fact, in many ways, it was the reverse. If you look at accounts of pilgrimages being made from India to the Hijaz, then actually it's the exact opposite. You'll see that the way that the Arabs are being spoken about, it's almost like it's a mirror image of the world we live in today. And so, Sharif Hussain hears that Mahmud al-Hassan has arrived. He orders him to come before into his presence, and his demand is that Sheikh Mahmud al-Hassan, he recognizes that the true rulers of the Muslim world should be those in Hijaz. That Sharif Hussain has the actual right, he has the authority to be able to call himself the Khalif, that the Ottomans, that they're corrupt, so on and so forth. So actually, Mahmud al-Hassan tries to be very clever about this initially. He doesn't necessarily buy it. He doesn't necessarily give an answer to Sharif Hussain straight away. What he does is he tries to evade until he's really cornered. And then eventually, when this demand is made of him, he says that for him to renege on the relationship with the Sultan in Turkey, which was the seat of the Ottoman Empire at the time, would be effectively for him to make his shahada, his own testification of the faith, completely null and void. That he would become a non-Muslim, that he would be a Khawarij for doing this. So Sharif Hussain obviously gets mad, and he doesn't like the fact that this kind of great scholar of India is refusing to sign a fatwa that supports him and gives him legitimacy. And so he hands Sharif Hussain over to the British, who then detain him and those that came with him from India. Now, what's really fascinating is that Hussein Ahmad Madani is like he's just around Mahmoud al-Hassan the whole time. And when Mahmoud al-Hassan and his colleagues get detained, Hussein Ahmad Madani says, "Well, detain me as well." They don't want him. They don't need him in this situation. He's not under arrest. He's not being suspected of anything. But Madani says, "Look, once you've had this great illuminating figure into your life, why would you want to be deprived of his presence? And so if you're going to arrest him, then arrest me too and take me to wherever you're taking him as well." It's quite a remarkable moment, actually, kind of love and affection towards his to somebody that he considered a teacher in his life. So what happens to these guys? They're all detained. They are put on a rendition ship to Port Said in Egypt, where they're detained in a place where the British were detaining a lot of political prisoners. And then they are all sent to the prison island of Malta in 1917. I actually had the privilege with some colleagues to visit the National Archives in Malta. And while I was there, I went through, I think must have been like thousands of pages of documentation. But eventually, after going through like endless shipping manifests, I actually found the original shipping manifest that showed that 5 Indian prisoners of war were taken, on the dates that we knew from from Port Said, then transferred to the prison island of Malta, where a lot of other political prisoners across the Muslim world and even outside of it were being detained as well. But they were largely Muslim prisoners who were being detained there, people who were considered to be seditious to the project of British colonization. So between 1917 to 1920, these men are detained on the prison island of Malta, and while they're there, they, I wouldn't say that they were troublesome. They were interviewed about their beliefs, and Barbara Metcalfe does a very, very great job of actually detailing some of the interrogations as they took place. But the men, largely, they had kind of concerns around halal meat, about being able to do their own slaughter, about various things. But what was clear is that Sheikh Mahmoud al-Hassan had a great deal of respect on the island while he was there. Even in 1919, actually, it's interesting. I mean, we don't know whether or not they actually met or how much they communicated, but it is fascinating to know that from Egypt, the Wahdist leader, Saad Zaghloul, who was trying to lead a movement against British colonialism, he was sent there as well. And it's actually Saad Zaghloul's detention, and this is why it's important, that really introduces to a 13-year-old boy named Sayyid Qutb on the need to resist the British for the first time. Saad Zaghloul's detention was hugely impactful, and it really set a number of young Egyptians on a pathway towards being involved in like kind of anti-colonial resistance. So that was in 1919. And eventually in 1920, these men are all released, and actually they're all sent back to India. They're not sent to Hijaz. And unfortunately, Sheikh al-Hind Mahmoud al-Hassan, he passes away quite soon after he arrives in India, and Madani, who was with him, is welcomed as a hero and rises very quickly through the ranks of the Deoband school, where eventually he becomes the principal, the headmaster of the entire college. And it's fascinating that there are a number of detentions of him that take place. And the reason why he's detained and he's put on trial a number of times is because he gets involved with the boycott of the British products movement. He becomes a close ally of Gandhi. They involve themselves in a struggle to remove the British from Indian soil. And because of that, it's fascinating that the British really come down quite hard on him. Separate to the book, I spent some time in the UK National Archives, which are based in Kew, and there I found some interesting documentation around the Nawab of Bhopal being pressured by the British to remove funding from the Deoband school if Hussein Ahmad Badi didn't curtail his boycott activities. So it's interesting to see how the British were trying to influence the Deoband school externally. And I think, the book, while of course it's a history book, it tells the story of the past. I think in so many ways it tells stories about, our contemporary times, how we involve ourselves in resistance movements against kind of, structural oppression that's taking place, how we engage with the state, how we engage with our own ethics as Muslims, what we're willing to do to sacrifice in order to keep our ethics alive, what we're willing to do to ally with other groups. And I think Hussein Ahmad Bandini's life, as a non-Deobandi, as somebody who hasn't been brought up in that school or in that tradition, there is so much to admire about his life and his legacy. So again, this book, Hussein Ahmad Bandini, The Jihad for Islam and India's Freedom, highly recommended. So inshallah, I hope many of you will be able to pick it up, and I look forward, as always, to hearing your comments about it. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Islam 21C brings to you 20 brand new unique series from renowned and respected shuyukh from across the globe, with one mission: to bring Muslims together in an online congregation never seen before in history, and lift the spirit of this Ramadan to bring us closer to Allah more than ever.
Man is left with no way of knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala other than by virtue of his names and his majestic attributes that he gave himself and gifted humanity with.
We want to raise our children in the most perfect way, and perfection belongs to Allah. If a person comes to you whose religion and character pleases you, then get your daughters married to him.
It's not going to be easy, but Allah never leaves you alone. That's the essence of what we can get from the Prophet's life.
It's my pleasure, it's my honor to introduce Quran recitation from the Imam Jazari Institute.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
Now just think with me about the verse where Allah says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُمْسِكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ أَن تَزُولَا.
We'll start with an easy one for you, Sheikh, inshallah. Can I postpone Taraweeh until the last third of the night?
Yeah, so essentially the night prayer is offered after Salat al-Isha, and you have until Salat al-Fajr to offer that.
We're all linked together in this. And that's really what empathy is. I mean, empathy in Arabic is like ataf, atuf, to tilt towards, to move towards.
Conveying insults. The Arabs had a saying, مَا شَتَمَكْ إِلَّا مَنْ بَلَّغَكْ. The one who insulted you is the one who conveyed the insult to you.
There can be no more greater relationship of a husband and a wife than the Prophet ﷺ and Khadija.
We don't just leave that piece of knowledge that we've received just there on the page.
This virus is a mercy for us Muslims, because the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us in a hadith that when you're afflicted with something, it's an expiation of your sins.
Down to earth like gravity, imagine me trying to turn my dreams to reality.
Allah Jalla wa Ala mentioned those who come in the front. وَالسَّابِقُونَ السَّابِقُونَ. They are the most successful people.
How we can embed the love of the Quran in the hearts of the young generation.
Welcome to the online masjid. Sign up now for your personal access to 300 plus free on-demand video content.